Heroes don't kill people.
Well, I do.
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, the Infuso. And let's just get right into it. We're talking about The Rock's introduction to the DCEU. A movie that a lot of people seem to have a lot of feelings toward, most of which are very negative. Now, of course, in this present time, I've only gotten the opportunity to watch the movie once. And that opportunity came without the ability to pause and rewind. So if you're looking for a deep dive into this movie, you're gonna have to wait until it comes out on DVD. But as for now, let this act as my interim review for Black Adam. First things first, this movie has amassed a fair amount of hate in a short amount of time. And honestly, I kind of feel like it's mostly unjustified. Look, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that this movie is amazing and without flaw. I don't think it's great, but I do at least think it's pretty good. It most definitely has its faults, and a lot of the complaints that people do have about the movie, I would say are mostly valid. And while I do agree with a lot of the problems people have stated, I disagree that those things completely ruin the movie. Because there are a lot of elements that really work here. And that's why I'm gonna break this down for you. Everything about Black Adam. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Don't worry about spoilers though, they'll come more toward the end and they'll come with warning. First things first, the good. Both surprisingly and unsurprisingly, The Rock is the highlight of the movie. Unsurprisingly because he is in fact The Rock, and he's just kind of great in even the worst movies he's been in. He seems to be an actor of quality even when the movie has none. But I say surprisingly because I wasn't confident going into this after I saw the commercials. Hearing the way The Rock portrayed the Black Adam just made me think, what is this guy doing? But now that I've seen the movie, I get it. And I think a big part of the reason I was a little bit worried was because this is the first time I've ever seen The Rock not play The Rock. He's playing a much more broody, much more serious magical power-having brute. I don't know, I'm not used to The Rock being so stoic, but he's not bad at it. It just threw me off a little bit without further context. And even in saying this, even if The Rock is coming across as monotone and without emotion, his charisma still breaks through his intentional stone-like performance. He's still entertaining, and he's still getting laughs. Just this time around, they come at the character's common misunderstanding of the world around him, and also the meaning of words. The Rock is great here, and I'd really like to see him return to the role. And I credit this movie with the way it managed to toe the line between hero and villain, never really subscribing the character to either role. And by the end of the movie, it's clear that Black Adam is a full-fledged anti-hero. So props to them for pulling it off. It would have been real easy for them either to intentionally or unintentionally turn the main character into the hero. But this movie avoided that, and stayed mostly faithful to the source. And I don't know how anybody else feels, but I was getting some serious Terminator 2 vibes watching. The relationship between Black Adam and Amon, the boy that he's watching over, it almost seems like the blueprint of that relationship is the very similar dynamic from the movie mentioned. He is his pseudo John Connor. And I ain't knocking it, because quite frankly, I was a fan of it. I like that Adam has someone who can ground him and show him humanity. Try to teach him right from wrong. Somebody that he learns compassion from. Or, I guess in this case, someone he learns it a second time around with. I just wish it was afforded a little bit more room to grow naturally. Personally, I'm a big fan of the Hawkman and Dr. Fate friendship here. The movie doesn't start and establish their relationship, they kind of just drop their audience into it. The two seem like colleagues, friends, and to some degree, brothers through bond. These are two characters I would have never thought would make it to the big screen. And yet, here they are. And they're actually quite great. I also enjoyed Amanda Waller's minimum involvement in the plot. I like the idea that she's always around, but she's also never actually around in these movies. She's always up to something somewhere else, but still has a presence despite that. I think it really sells the fact that this woman is in charge. And it's also a good indication that she holds a whole lot of power. I love that they introduced a Justice Society. It's a little weird for me though, because I guess I've always seen them as the precursor to the Justice League, and having them coexist on any level is definitely a choice that I wouldn't have made, but I can see how it could potentially pay off. I like their inclusion, and the end result makes it feel like this movie is just as much of a Justice Society movie as it is a Black Adam movie. And watching Black Adam semi-learn their ways of heroing definitely stand out as some of the best moments in the film. I like that some of the conflicts in this movie aren't entirely black or white. Most are shaded gray, which, makes sense for a movie about an anti-hero. He's not exactly good or bad. He himself is an area shaded gray.
It's a fine line, not gonna lie.
The Justice Society's feud with Black Adam is brought on by preventative measures. They want to ensure the safety of others and aren't sure that Black Adam can be trusted. But on the contrary, Black Adam, having lived his entire life as a slave, isn't too keen on being taken prisoner. The man wants to be free and isn't looking to kneel to anyone. So you can understand how all these characters are feeling in this moment. Everyone means well, but their goals kind of contradict each other. There really isn't a good side and a bad side here, there's just two opposing sides. I can see how this might be a complaint some have, but I think the fact that the origin itself is developing alongside the main plot is a really bold choice. It's not like this hasn't been done before in movies like Man of Steel and Batman Begins, but it feels a little bit different here with the way that they go about it. We're not just subtly learning more about this person's backstory, we're given new perspectives on this backstory. We learn the tale at the very beginning of the movie, but throughout the flashbacks, we're given different points of view, different beliefs on the legend, and somewhere along those stories, the truth. In regards to the other characters' origin stories, I think they made a really smart move by only subtly referencing them in passing, cutting straight to the point, and only allowing the characters' pasts to be brought up in conversations amongst themselves. Aesthetically, I think this movie knew what it was doing. All of the suits in here look really good. They somehow managed to make Hawkman look legitimate, save for a close-up or two where he kinda looks a little bit tacky. But still, for the most part, they got it down. The Rock looks really awesome in this. Although after it's zapped, I kinda missed the hoodie. And I guess Dr. Fate's helmet could have used eye holes for my liking. But regardless, it's all on point, and it's all really good. The special effects also are pretty solid. I think all of the powers that were used in this movie almost always looked great. There might have been a time or two in the opening where I felt like Black Adam's powers looked a little bit too goofy, but outside of that, yeah, it's good. When the movie wants to be funny, it's mostly pretty funny. There were several times the audience I saw this movie with let out audible laughs, and it wasn't at the expense of the movie, it was along with the movie. There's definitely some pretty entertaining back and forths. The movie is mostly well acted, with the exception for a role or two. And I'm sure a lot of you have already seen the leaked mid-credit scene, but if you haven't, it's worth the watch in theaters. And I'm sure it will make a lot of people happy. The bad. The exposition at times can come off as soulless and unnatural. Characters stop sounding like people for moments to articulate the plot to the audience, as if we were incapable of following along. It's not a continuous thing, but it is a continual thing. The pacing, and I cannot get over this, the pacing feels very, very off in the movie. It almost feels like this doesn't want to be a movie, but instead wants to be a highlight reel to a better movie. And because of that, the characters' relationships seem forced and at times kind of fake. They skipped over scenes showing characters bonding and establishing dynamics in favor of proceeding the plot along as quick as possible. Look, I like that the movie wasted no time in diving into the plot. But at some point, it just feels like the plot is so thin that we're diving into an empty pool. Like, it still makes a splash, but it's not the one that you would have wanted. I don't know, I just feel like it would have been nice to have some time to relax and let things play out. Because of the way everything just speeds along, instead of giving us time to get to know the characters, by the end of the movie, I still don't feel like I know most of them. And I have a hard time buying into a lot of their relationships because a lot of them just seem insisted upon. Black Adam and this kid's friendship feels like it doesn't have enough time devoted to it. Yet, it's a primary part of the plot. It is one of the focal points, and it's just kind of glossed over. It's skimmed past. It's almost like this movie has a defeatist attitude. It goes into itself like, oh, you've already seen this before, you know how it goes. I understand that in some ways, this kid serves as Adam's surrogate son, and Adam is a reluctant father figure for the boy. I get that. It just seems like Adam's disregard was replaced by devotion without any real explanation in a moment's notice. I like the relationship, I just wish it was set up better. And speaking of relationships that should have been set up better, or hey, better yet, not included at all, Atom Smasher and Cyclone don't seem to have any real chemistry. yet they flirt with each other the entire time that they're on screen. Their interactions are probably the fakest feeling to me, and actually overall, they do absolutely nothing to really affect the plot. They're there for fight and flirt scenes. That's it. They don't play into the main story, and their side thing is an abysmal time waster that doesn't really contribute anything to the movie overall. Their collective inclusion is pointless. I also find Atom Smasher's design to be a little bit too Deadpool-y. I mean, yes, they did make him look like the original character, but it's clear that they took some inspiration from Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool in the eye and head region. I like the character, which is a big shock for me because this is the first role I've ever liked this actor in. But when the movie's trying to make him quirky outside of his suit, it can be some of the most cringeworthy randomness I've ever seen in a movie. I mean, to be fair, sometimes it works in favor of the movie. You know, it serves as a punchline here or there. But when it's an attempt to endear us to the character, it's too try-hard and unnatural. I mentioned the pacing before, but I really need to put emphasis on it again. The fact that this movie won't slow down makes a lot of it feel inorganic. Relationships are rushed, plot points are brushed over, and most importantly, motives change at rapid speed at random. There's this character Isis. Her whole belief system is based on the legend of the Black Adam. But then someone has a different take on the story, someone who is currently opposing Black Adam, and yet without any research or investigating, she just takes them at their word, believes them entirely now, and completely goes against her previously established beliefs. Only to later, within that same exact scene, go back to her original beliefs by claiming that Black Adam can be the legend that people believe him to be. This whole scene is under 2 minutes long. Like really, need I say more? I don't know if this is a case of a lot getting left on the cutting room floor, but if it was, then this movie might benefit from an extended cut of some kind. The plot is also so quick to move along, it makes entire sequences of events feel more than a little bit goofy. One of the flashback scenes, I don't want to get into detail here, but one of the flashback scenes, you know what, just keep that in mind. Goofy sequence of events, one of the flashback scenes. You see this movie, you will know what scene I am talking about. There are a lot of things in this movie that seem reminiscent of a lot of other movies. I previously mentioned the Terminator-John Connor relationship before, and while I was in favor of that similarity, there are still other contributions here that feel less inspired by and more ripped off of other films. Hawkman and Dr. Fate train a few powered teens. And of course, naturally, that's giving off some X-Men vibes. I mean, that's inevitable, right? Like you think that. You think training younger heroes with powers, you're gonna think of X-Men. But you know what doesn't help that comparison? The fact that the place in which we're introduced to these characters looks like a carbon copy of Xavier's School for Gifted Mutants. Complete with its own X-Jet. When we're first introduced to the Reforming Justice Society, it's in a conversation between Hawkman and Amanda Waller. And interspersed in between these shots of them talking are shots of the characters. We open up exchanging information on characters we're just meeting while these characters aren't present. So this really just feels like a more tame opening setup as those Suicide Squad movies. If it was a callback, it was poorly done. And if it wasn't a callback, then they're blatantly recycling their own creative, but doing it worse now. Look, there is a lot of good in this movie, but I think the final product suffers from a lot of the better additions in it not being fully fleshed out. And also this movie not knowing when to take the time to tell a story. And lastly, the ugly. What's a really bitter pill to swallow here is that all of this was the culmination of a project that was pieced together 15 years ago. And when you keep that in mind, the movie does come off as a little bit underwhelming. You had a decade and a half, and that's the best you could do with it? Like I said, I don't agree with the masses. I don't think this is one of the worst superhero movies, and I don't even think that it's a bad superhero movie. But I also know that it's nowhere near as good as it should have been, especially when you take into account how much time and effort was put into it. And now, let me give you some of my thoughts that I couldn't have given you without spoiling the movie. So if you're not looking for spoilers, leave now. So there's a mid-credit scene, which is really just put in the movie to show us that Henry Cavill is sticking around as Superman. And as a fan of Henry Cavill as Superman, I think it was kind of cool. I appreciate this fan service and setup, but I also do have some problems with it. First off, the John Williams music accompanying Superman's appearance, I love it as much as the next guy. Truly, I do. But that was Christopher Reeve's theme. It shouldn't just be the overall Superman theme, that was that Superman's theme. This Superman has his own theme. Why don't you think to use that? And more importantly, while I am grateful to see Henry Cavill in the suit again, this really shouldn't have been him at the end of the movie. I'm not alone in thinking this should have been Shazam, right? I get it, the former Captain Marvel isn't exactly at Superman levels of fame. I understand that. But he's still already established in the lore, and he's also the main nemesis to the main character of this movie. And you gotta think that inevitably, those two characters are gonna meet up at some point. Why not try to set that up? And also, one last problem with this. Superman's working for Amanda Waller now? Excuse me? I have a couple questions. When did that happen? How did that happen? And why did that happen? If there was another big negative I had with this movie, it's that all of its twists were beyond predictable. Dr. Fate constantly talking to Hawkman about his vision, and them having to say goodbye, is set up to make the audience think and make Hawkman believe that Hawkman was going to die. But in reality, it was actually Dr. Fate saying goodbye to Hawkman. Dr. Fate was gonna die. Like, that was very obvious to me, probably because I've seen something like that done in a million things before this. Like, the second they had that first conversation, I was like, oh no, this movie's just throwing me the proverbial reverse Uno card. I ain't falling for that. I know what this is. And the big reveal of who the villain is makes me feel like people who made this movie lacked all subtlety. The shots were shown of the character's face throughout the opening make it very obvious that he is not working with the people he's supposed to be working with. And then you compound that with the fact that he's also very obviously the same actor who played the king in the flashback scenes. And it's almost like, why have this as a reveal? Was this supposed to shock me? Because it didn't. You didn't so much leave a trail of breadcrumbs as you did leave a trail of whole loaves of bread. You might as well have given the movie-going audience maps to the plot when they got it. Overall, I think that Black Adam is a pretty decent starting point for the character. And like I said, I would really like to see more of The Rock in this role. Rock and roll. And I feel like the brand would benefit from a sequel that puts more emphasis on character development and developing the connections between these characters. Honestly, don't believe what you hear about this one. This movie, despite its blemishes, is still fairly entertaining and worth a lot more praise than it's been getting. I would definitely recommend checking it out for yourself. I think it's worth the price of admission. So if you like this video and would be up for a full in-depth review in the future, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying rock and roll. And with all that being said, I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.